Hey there, if you own or operate a gas station here in Texas, you already know that keeping up with compliance is absolutely key. It's how you protect your business. So today, we're going to break down the essential environmental testing you need to know, the annual and the 3-year requirements. All right, let's jump right in. You know, this is the one question that can really keep a station owner up at night. Are you honestly ready if an inspector from the TCEQ, that's the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, shows up at your door tomorrow? The rules can feel kind of complicated, for sure, but being prepared is your best shield against hefty fines and, even worse, downtime. We're here to make sure your answer to this question is always a confident yes. And we've got a really clear roadmap to get you there. First, we'll start with the basics of Texas compliance. Then, we'll walk through exactly what's in those annual and 3-year tests. After that, we'll get into the super important topic of record keeping. And finally, we'll talk about a simple solution to manage the whole shebang. Okay, first up, let's get a handle on the rules of the road. These regulations all come from the TCEQ, and really their goal is simple. They want to prevent fuel leaks and spills. You know, the kind of thing that can damage the environment and cost you, the business owner, a small fortune. So it's best to think of these rules as a kind of insurance policy for your investment. Now, the official rulebook is called 30 TAC Chapter 334. I know that sounds super technical and intimidating, right? But don't worry, it's really just the state's official guide for making sure your underground fuel systems are safe and secure. It outlines everything we're about to talk about. So let's get into our first big topic, the annual systems check. I always like to think of this as a yearly health checkup for your station's most important equipment. It's all about making sure the electronic and mechanical parts of your leak detection system are working just like they're supposed to. So what exactly are we checking every 12 months? Well, think of this stuff as the nervous system of your entire station. We're testing the brain, your automatic tank gauge, to make sure it's reading fuel levels accurately. We're checking the reflexes, your line leak detectors, to make sure they can react to a problem in a split second. And of course, we're testing all the sensors in your sumps, which are basically your first line of defense, an early warning system for any potential leak. And this right here really gets to the why behind the test. Let's take that line leak detector, the LLD test. The whole point is to prove that your system can spot a really, really small leak. We're talking just 3 gallons per hour. Now, catching a leak that small, that early, that can literally be the difference between a quick, minor repair and a massive, costly environmental cleanup. On top of those electronic tests, you also have to do an annual walkthrough of all your containment sumps, and it's a pretty simple 3-step process. First, you just do a visual check for any cracks or damage. Second, if you see any liquid or gunk in there, you've got to get it cleaned out within 96 hours. And third, you just verify that any corrosion protection you have is still doing its job. Okay, so that's the annual stuff. Now, every 3 years, the focus shifts a little bit. We go from checking if things are working right to checking if things are physically solid. These are the tightness tests, and they're designed to make sure your containment systems are totally sealed and can actually hold fuel if there's a spill. The big 3-year tests cover your main containment gear. We're talking about spill buckets, the things that catch drips when the fuel truck is making a delivery. We're talking about containment sumps, the boxes that your pumps and pipes sit in. And we're talking about your overfill prevention equipment, that critical safety device that stops a delivery before your tank gets too full. These are the physical walls meant to keep fuel where it belongs. You know, this brings up a question we hear from station owners all the time. Do I really need to test all of my spill buckets? And that's a great question because the answer is actually no, not always. And knowing the difference here can save you a bit of a headache. And here's the rule broken down nice and simple. If you have the standard single-walled spill buckets, then yes, they absolutely have to be tested every 3 years. But if you've got double-walled buckets, you're exempt from that test as long as, and this is the important part, as long as you're monitoring the space between those 2 walls every 30 days. So it all comes down to knowing exactly what kind of equipment you have. And here is a really critical update you need to have on your radar. Back in 2018, the rules changed for those old ball float overfill valves. So now, if you have one and it fails its 3-year inspection, you can't just fix it. You must replace it with a newer, approved type, like a flapper valve. Staying on top of these little rule changes is so important. So, we've covered the tests, but believe it or not, doing the tests is only half the battle. Now we need to talk about what might be the most important part of all, your records. This isn't just about shuffling papers. Having the right documentation is your absolute best defense if an inspector shows up. So how long do you have to keep all this paperwork? Well, the magic number is 5. That's it. All of your testing and inspection records have to be kept on file right there at your station for a minimum of 5 years. Not 3, not 4, 5. And here is exactly why that 5-year rule is so crucial. When a TCEQ investigator stops by, they're almost always going to ask for the last 2 cycles of your tests. So for a 3-year test, that means they want to see records going back more than 5 years to prove you've been compliant the whole time. If you can't show them the paperwork, in their eyes, it's like the test never even happened. Whew, okay, I know that was a lot. So this slide is a perfect little recap of everything we just covered. It lays out every major requirement, how often it needs to be done, and what it covers. You've got your annual stuff, release detection and sump walkthroughs, and your 3-year stuff, spill bucket and sump tightness, plus that overfill inspection. Think of it as your compliance cheat sheet. We've definitely covered a lot of ground here. Annual tests, 3-year tests, 5 years of records. It's a really complex problem. But the good news is there's a simple solution. Honestly, looking at all these rules and deadlines, does it feel a bit overwhelming? If it does, you are not alone. So many station owners feel that exact same way. It's a huge challenge to keep track of it all, especially when you're also trying to, run a business. And that's really the heart of it, isn't it? Managing all this environmental compliance stuff has pretty much become a full-time job all by itself. Your expertise is serving your customers and growing your business. That's where your focus should be. And that's exactly where we come in. At Total Environmental Solutions Texas, or just TEST for short, we are your expert partners for all things TCEQ testing. We handle all of the annual and 3-year requirements that we've talked about today. We make sure you are always ready for an inspection. It protects your investment, and frankly, it just gives you peace of mind. So please, contact us today and let us take care of all your testing needs for you.